he's missing a piece. Broken butterfly. Still flying. I'm gonna try to do this quick so I can get this poor little lost ant back outside. Yeah, there he is. He went all around the inside for a long while, then he went on the outside, then he climbed down onto my piece of paper, and he just kept circling it, looking for, I'm assuming, the scent back home or whatever, and couldn't find it, so I got him back on the glass, and I got to get him back outside. I've been trying to, well, just quote-unquote experimenting, if you can call it that, getting sour clover. I'd like to grow it so I could have it in the winter, even though I haven't utilized it at all, and it's been in season for quite a while now so far this year. So yeah, I just had a couple things. That was pretty much it. That wild clover, that was a big one. So a little peaked right now. It's very temperamental when these things come down and close up. If there's too much or too little sun or water or what have you. Whoop, he's off again. Come on, get back on there. Well, I lost him. But yeah, I've been checking out x to the x lately. I guess like y equals x to the x, or f of x equals x to the x, except it stops behaving like a function below 0, I guess. And this is a picture looking at the y-I plane of the graph, but just something interesting I'd never really, I guess, thought of or seen before was how, well, let's see. Like, this is a very crude y and x drawing of it, and if you, like, if I type it in my calculator, it only shows this part. Overall, this is blank, except there'll be like a few dots where the y's are, I guess, where the complex part is crossing the y plane. Oh, here he is. Come on, little guy. Lost him again. Man, it's a fast one. Now I got something else. Fruit fly? Yeah, and these come up depending on what fraction. The top and the bottom come up depending on what fraction you use. When I first just started typing in numbers into a calculator trying to figure out what was going on, what the heck is this thing? What is a weird thing? Okay, yeah, depending on what numbers I was typing in, because I don't have any more advanced, I don't know, math stuff, and I don't know a lot, so I just have to sometimes type in numbers, and I used a calculator on this exercise, which I'm embarrassed about, but I have no capacity whatsoever to take the, 30th root of something or whatever, so Yeah, when I did it with this was odd odd den odd denominators, then with odd and even numerators, and they basically did the same thing except for below x is 0, the odd numerators were negative and the even numerators were positive, though more or less mimicking in value. And then above 0 they all fell on this line, so they trace this image here. And with odd denominator, or at least with 11 as the denominator, I used 10 for my even and 11 just because it was convenient. Though I thought maybe 15 and 16 would be better. Now I'm thinking I might just, well, anyway, if I just use the even denominator of 10, then with my odd numerators, that's where I get this swirling picture. So like all of this is with x, negative x, and then once it gets to here, it's in the positive x realm, and this line is looking at this from this direction, looking at that. Yeah, so all of these, all of these right here are that swirl, and it's like basically swirling around the x-axis, getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it gets up to 1, and then whoosh. And it reaches, at the end, it reaches quite further into the negative I than it did reaching into the I. But yeah, as it goes back, it just spirals around tighter and tighter and tighter. And so you have this happening with the swirl. I'm assuming probably filling out about this shape sideways, but I've yet to plot it. I really want to build it three-dimensionally, and I haven't figured out the best way to do that yet, because I want to see it. I'd like it to look cool, and but I want it to be easy, because I got a lot of shit to work on. But anyway, I just thought that was worth mentioning. I took math when I was younger, and stuff like this never come up, and people always talk about like discontinuous functions or whatever, but when you plug in the numbers, there's stuff there. And what's also cool about this, like, here's my odd numerator, my even numerator, but it's going, you know, negative 30 tenths, negative 29, negative 28, negative 27 tenths, negative 26 tenths, negative 25 tenths. I know it can be reduced, but just for the ease of keeping track, I just did it that way. But then it's not only circling this way, but then these are going back and forth between positive and negative, like the value is always increasing, or the value is always following these lines, but the charge each time is going back and forth. So every 4, so negative 30, I have a negative number, and 29, 28, positive number, 27, 26, negative number. So every 4 tenths, or every 2 tenths, it's going back and forth between positive and negative. And then on this side, it's always circling around, and that's just kind of a fascinating feature of a function, of anything really. But it also speaks to like continuity of the continuum and of lines, and like just the way in which things are separated. And just thought that was worth noting. And this little guy kind of reminded me of it, so not totally, but you know, it's a nice little awkward spiral happening. It's a pretty little plant, beautiful red stem, and it's, yeah, delicious. Then I guess the other interesting point about this was that my interest in x to the x came up because I'm completely confounded by e to the x, and I'm convinced they say there's like no real geometry to it. Like you can make a graph, so you can make a picture or whatever, but they say, or I've heard it said by people who know a lot more than me, that like there's no geometry to e. It's not something you can understand like some of the other transcendental numbers, and I'm convinced that there is a geometry of e. And anyway, just thinking about that, because I was thinking about that. I haven't thought about e for a long time, because it was more when I was first getting into some of this stuff, and so I was kind of hopping all over the place with different things, I guess like I do now, but now I have a little more specific interest, for better or worse. And at the same time, I was curious. It came up where I was curious about like the negative 1/2 to the negative 1/2, and anyway, through all that, I got interested in the idea of x over x and started trying to figure it out, and then I shelved it for a long time, and then it just kind of came up again. And but those two interests, and my interest with negative 1/2 to the negative 1/2 power, came up while also first studying the unit circle, which I'd never really seen before a few years ago. And my interest in that is what kind of pulled that stuff out. But so this is a little bit further away from things, and mostly I spend a lot of time between like root 1 and root 6. I mean, that's kind of where I focus a lot of my efforts, and geometries I can deal with in that sense. But I thought, well, maybe it would be good just to do something quote-unquote completely different, just to get me thinking differently, and also just in an effort to think three-dimensionally. And I always have beef with like the whole Cartesian grid, but it's powerful, and there's a lot there, and I gotta get over that. It's just trying to figure out three-dimensionality, and then trying to figure out, you know, the Cartesian XYZ plane might not necessarily have to do with the actual structure of reality. It's a powerful tool, and it might have to do with the structure of reality, but what other three-dimensional grid options are there, or are there? But anyway, that's where a lot of this came from. X to the x, x to the x.